right, guys, we're gonna check out this video by Mentis Wave. Elon Musk derangement and these are the bits, Shago. Elon Musk. This is a new video by Mentis, just came out. Looks like yesterday. Elon Musk's derangement and the death of the reasonable left. I was gonna look at kind of because I know I missed a lot of Mentis videos, like just going into your. The last one I watched was, oh man, there's a lot. It was this one right here, right? This was the last one I watched. So it's been like a while since I've seen one, and yeah, I'm a little behind. But I heard this one is super. I wanted to go back and like watch the older ones, but then I was told that this one is super relevant. So I should check it out because it's super relevant. If some people pretend that history or geography gives them the right to subjugate other races, nations, or peoples, there can be no peace.
A common disease that is somewhat of a subset of Trump derangement syndrome. And this, of course, is Elon Musk derangement syndrome, where people who dislike Elon Musk allow it to reach a point of manic obsession. And as a result, of course, they interpret anything and everything that Elon Musk does in the most absolutely ridiculous, bad faith, disconnected from reality manner that they possibly can. Which is unfortunate because it leads to a lot of very stupid, bad political takes, often from people in positions of high influence, such as the mainstream media or people who are actually politicians, which then, of course, leads to a
oh my god, this just reminded me of something. I saw my dad the other day, and he was like talking to me about like politics, or like just like talking about like what's going on in the world, right? And my dad's like, "Yeah, did you hear about that Elon Musk thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, Dad, I heard about the Elon Musk thing." And he goes, "Yeah, you know how he did this? My heart goes out to you." And we were like in public, and he did this. I was like, yes, Dad, I know about it. And he's like, yeah, this thing. And I was like,
massive amount of disinformation spread.
Like, I can't. Dude, it's because my dad is a fucking troll. That's why. He's a troll, and he knows it's gonna make me uncomfortable. So that's why. You want me to tell you like one thing my dad did one time? Dude, this is my dad in a nutshell. Like one time we went to like an aquarium, and so we're at this aquarium, and there was like this tank, and he walked up to the tank. It was like this big aquarium tank. He walks up to it and he goes, "Oh my God." And then like everyone started coming, like, cause they heard him go, oh my God. Like he was like standing there, and everyone in the aquarium started walking over to the aquarium. And as like people started to like kind of fill in and like look at this aquarium, my dad slowly like backed up and he snuck out. And we went to my dad and we were like, "What did you see?" And he's like, "Nothing." And then he walked away. And like he just caused like this giant crowd to like look at the aquarium. There was like literally nothing there.
Around. Because of course the people suffering from these derangement syndromes can't tell the difference between what is true and what is simply the product of their bad faith delusions. Also, this is another self-sponsored video. I've got some new Doge-related merch up on the good old merch store. And I figured I'd do another introductory sale because why not? Plus, I'm going to be doing some more Doge-related content in the future. But as for the merch itself, I included a texted and textless version of it, and in both cases you can select the colors. And of course, a dank mug version for good measure. Personally designed these myself, and the profits really do help out the channel. And plus, just look at how smug that Doge is. You know you want it. So links to buy these things will be in the description below. Anyways, back to the EDS question. And I bring this up because there has been a relatively recent case of Elon Musk derangement syndrome going around the interwebs that perfectly emphasizes a problem I've
seen. He's playing like an actual Mega Man game now.
Last 2 decades. And the event in question that showcases this is the recent phenomenon of these absolute blithering midwits taking the side of South Africa's absolutely insane collective ethno-guilt laws. The conversation's been going on for a while, but it recently reached a boiling point with this ex-post right here from Musk. Starlink is not allowed to operate in South Africa because I'm—
Wait, does he have sounds in the background?
Ex-post right here from Musk. Starlink is not allowed to operate in South Africa because I'm not black.
Is there sounds, guys?
It's been going on for Africa's absolutely insane collective ethno-guilt laws. The conversation's been going on for a while, but it recently reached a—
Oh my God, why can I hear it? I can fucking hear it, like all of the sounds.
Boiling point with this ex-post right here from Musk. Starlink is not allowed to
dude, I can hear it. Fuck.
Africa because I'm not black.
It's because I played Mega Man. That's why. I
Yep,
played Mega Man
that's
X.
pretty much what it is. He isn't joking. That's effectively what the laws there actually do. Here's a bit of history, but condensed because it's not the main point of this video. Basically, apartheid happened in South Africa, which were laws that legally separated people based on ethnicity. These laws were ended over 30 years ago, and what is South Africa?
Dude, people really like saying that, like apartheid. That's like their favorite thing to say. It's like, oh, like that place has
Because it's
apartheid.
not the main point of this video. Basically, apartheid happened in South Africa, which were laws that legally separated people based on ethnicity. These laws were ended over 30 years ago, and what is South Africa put in its place? Well, they unfortunately fell for the good old-fashioned fallacy of thinking you could fix alleged crimes of the past with collective guilt today, despite the fact that many of the people alive today had nothing to do with apartheid in the past. It's summarized relatively nicely in this post right here. There are 142 race-based laws in operation in South Africa. During apartheid, these types of laws discriminated against not white people. Since 1994, they have been reversed to discriminate against non-white.
Oh dear.
And yes, unfortunately, the justification for this is exactly as stupid as you may imagine. The state did a bad thing to Group X, and therefore, for the sake of fairness, the state is now justified in doing the same thing to Group Y. Now, what they're specifically referring to here is the Black Economic Empowerment Laws. These are policies of the South African government that give preferential...
That's a great way to build racial unity and just unity in general, is by punishing people for their race.
Treatment to businesses that give ownership and positions to people based on their ethnicity. And the reason it's more
Great job,
accurate to say
government.
ethnicity rather than just black is because they've actually kind of gone back and forth in the history of what they consider black. For example, they often switch back and forth on whether or not they consider Chinese to be considered black for the case of these South African laws. So in other words, the only real consistency...
It reminds me of that like one Tony video. Dude, did you guys see this? It's like the Tony video right here. Oh my god, the only one I can find is an Asmund video of it.
I am my boyfriend's first black girlfriend.
If you're black, then I'm the real Donald Trump himself. China, China, I
China,
know
China.
very well.
Apartheid this, apartheid that.
Since
Why
here
can't
is
anyone
not
just
white.
apartheid cheeks leaflet?
Thanks for the bits, man. Thank you, Shago.
The case of these South African laws. So in other words, the only real consistency here is not white. So it's really, in practice, just state-enforced discrimination against you for being white in South Africa. And the way the law works in practice is it just gives businesses a scorecard based on a percentage of how many people who are not white own the business, how many people who are not white are managers of the business.
Oh my god, dude, they freaking gamified it? Holy shit.
And based on the number of collectivist ethno-guilt points the business has, they may or may not be allowed to do business in South Africa. Because
it's like they're making like those fucking Warhammer armies. Damn.
ethno-guilt points the business has, they may or may not be allowed to do business in South Africa, because certain telecommunications and mining licenses and building permits and whatnot will only be granted to a business that either has enough points or has a certain percentage of being black-owned, which again they tend to define as just not being white. Now, how this is relevant to Elon Musk and Starlink, of course, in order to be eligible to apply for a permit for Starlink to operate in South Africa, you would have to give 30% of the company away to people that the South African government defines as black.
Wait, is that real? Wait, what? To comply, at least 30% of SpaceX's South African operations would have to be sold or donated. But we're the racists, guys, remember? Remember, we're the ones that are racist.
Africa, you would have to give 30% of the company away to people that the South African government defines as black, aka most of the time just meaning not white, aka not Elon Musk. Now, why these South African laws are ridiculous is honestly kind of obvious. It is again just collective.
I love how they always add this.
South African laws are ridiculous.
You can barely see it, but right here. They always add this, so like, I've seen this before. Like the all white people are racist, and then they add the fucking PayPal at the end. Like you could just give her money so you can feel like less bad about yourself.
Is honestly kind of
fucking
obvious.
ridiculous.
It is again just collective ethno-guilt. All of these laws can be summarized.
These people are fucking nasty, honestly. Like, disgustingly nasty.
As white people bad. But that's not what's really interesting here. Anybody can farm this happening for obvious content. What I find more interesting here
The grift is real, yeah, but we're the grifters, right, guys?
emphasizes a problem I've noticed for a while. And to understand this problem, let's look at what a few pseudo-intellectuals have been saying in regards to Elon Musk's little Starlink happening here. For instance, this random individual who is very highly unlikely to be above +1 SD on the G-Bell curve, McSpocky, who thinks that he's an absolute genius for saying, oh no, it's just because he hasn't applied for a license. Which, like all midwit takes, is of course pedantically correct. Regardless of whether or not he's applied for a license, has nothing to do within the context of the conversation of whether or not these South African laws are just.
Yep.
This is a common problem with suits. They think that if they
True.
nitpick at something that doesn't really matter, then this somehow counts as refuting the main point, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with the main central point. It completely ignores what the actual conversation is about, which is that these BEE laws are stupid and shouldn't exist. Because again, it is just collective guilt, enshrined into law. And of course, the sad thing about these derangement syndromes is that they cause people to resort to extremely stupid arguments. Arguments that are just
Hey, Noodle. Thank you so much. Thank you.
people to resort to extremely stupid arguments. Arguments that are just so obviously fallacious that even a 6-year-old child can understand what's wrong with them. Like this guy, for example, saying, Elon, stop the victim complex. Starlink isn't banned in South Africa because of your skin color. It's because you refuse to comply with local laws like every other telecom provider. Play by the rules or stay out. Simple. Except that, of course, the rule in question here from South Africa is a law that requires 30% ownership of not being white. Now, Elon Musk owns 42% of Starlink. So obviously, if Elon Musk was black, he wouldn't have to worry about this regulation. Again, I'm pretty sure you can explain this to a child. I know for a fact my 6-year-old self would not have any troubles understanding that a rule that requires a portion of your business to be owned by someone with a certain skin color would obviously not be an issue if you had that skin
How
color.
do people not see that this is racist? It blows my mind. It's so
begin with.
obvious.
And so
It's so clear cut and so obvious.
Derangement levels are so off the charts that they find themselves willing to accept these just absolutely insane tier arguments that no reasonable or serious person under any other context would accept. And they're not random trolls either. Like this one guy has over 100,000 followers. These are unfortunately actual adults. And they're of course using all the standard low IQ arguments in the book. Like this guy, he refuses to abide by the telecommunication laws of South Africa. You know, the standard circular argument, it's the law, therefore it is good, and it is good, therefore it should be the law. Round and round that logic goes forever. You know, the kind of stupid arguments that people make when they don't want to admit the real reason for why they believe a certain thing. Which of course is that they have Elon Musk Derangement Syndrome, along with most likely a dash of anti-white racism. Such as one clip I noticed from the Karen Hunter show.
It's very, very, very common nowadays. Like anti-white racism. Like I'm against all racism, and like it doesn't matter who it is.
With the standard collectivist argument in justification for this, that blacks somehow collectively own all of Africa. You know, the kind of arguments that they wouldn't accept in reverse. If someone were to say that white people collectively own Europe, these same people would freak out and call that white nationalism. Because of course, they don't actually believe the arguments that are coming out of their own mouths. It's all just a bunch of post-hoc justifications for their hatred and envy. And I must unfortunately inform you that many mainstream journalists, of course, double down on this stupidity. Like this little Pop-Tart from the Context News. Musk Starlink stalls in South Africa over equity law.
Envy is one of the biggest problems in society today.
Just read this little tidbit right here. To comply with BBBEE, at least 30% of SpaceX's South African operations would have to be sold or donated to stakeholders from historically disadvantaged groups. And then, in the very next little tidbit, because it is an international company, not because of Elon Musk's race. Imagine actually writing this. Within the same sentence, just completely contradicting your own reasoning. Again, it's not exactly a difficult step in logic. We're not talking 5 moves in a dialectic here before you figure out the truth of the matter. This is one move. This is not complicated. He owns 42% of the company, and therefore he would be in compliance with a law that requires 30% ownership based on ethnicity if he was that ethnicity. This is, again, something that a child could understand. And the truth, sadly, of course, is she probably does understand this. This person is probably just another lying journalist propaganda shill. Typical journo behavior at this point. Because, of course, there's more than one journo who did this. So, for example, we have here, because I'm not black, from the Mary Sue, Elon Musk's infuriating infuriating lies, as well as this little journoid from IOL, Elon Musk lies again. Starlink not allowed to operate in Africa because I'm not black. Both of them pretty much just doubling down on the absolute insane backwards reasoning, where they interpret what Musk is saying literally, and yet completely out of context with what the laws of South Africa actually are.
Yep.
I mean, sure, if you want to get technical and pedantic about it, Starlink could technically still operate there if they sold 30% equity or something, or invested in some other equivalent, just enough that they would earn enough points within the black economic empowerment regulations
which is ridiculous.
that they could then be allowed to operate, and the fact that Elon Musk is not black wouldn't
which is ridiculous. I wouldn't even want to participate in that kind of a system.
then matter. But that, of course, ignores the context
Like if I were Elon, I'd just say like, fuck you guys then.
of those laws and completely ignores the question of whether or not those laws are just, which again, just basic analysis of the policies reveals that they're not just at all. It's just completely ignoring the reality that if
Especially because Elon like kind of has a monopoly on this. Like, what the fuck are they gonna do about it? Like, they're gonna buy a bunch of satellites and put them up themselves?
Elon Musk was black, he would already be in line with those regulations. He would already have enough points within the black economic empowerment system that the South African government uses as their regulation to enforce their ethno-guilt ideology. And so any journalist who ignores that context is lying to you. And in my opinion, anybody who resorts to this kind of rhetoric just comes across
Wait, what game is this? What game is he playing?
a deeply unserious person. But again, that's kind of how derangement syndrome operates, whether it's Trump or Elon Musk derangement syndrome, because they've allowed their seething and coping to reach a point where their mental logic flow no longer self-aborts when it reaches an obvious contradiction. And so in their minds, reality matters less than the fact that Spaceship Man is bad.
Wait, is this multiplayer? I'm going to X-Dive offline, I see.
And that they must therefore inform the public on how bad Spaceship Man is, even when he's very obviously in the right. And to the mainstream media's credit, some of them did in fact report it somewhat honestly. For example, the Business Insider did a much better job. Not a great job because they still remain kind of neutral on an issue that isn't really something you should remain neutral on. You can't really take a neutral position on obvious things like someone claiming 1 + 1 = 3. There are cases where some people are just objectively in the right, and this is one of them, but at least Business Insider immediately admitted that it had to do with the black economic empowerment regulations, and that the happening that Elon Musk has stirred up here is largely about a debate over the South African government's policies and the business practices that they try to force with the BEE's, again, what I like to call ethno-guilt regulations. Because again, that's all these really are. South African racial laws today are just based on the flawed idea of punishing people based on their ethnicity today from these alleged crimes that happened 1 to 2 generations ago. And of course it doesn't work. I mean, aside from just ethics and philosophy and it being wrong because you can't really impugn collective guilt on individuals, it doesn't actually make any sense. It is, even in an absolute best case scenario, a very lazy and unintelligent way to do justice. If you just study basic history, we have plenty of documented evidence that shows that collective punishment doesn't work. And it never will work because it is based on a flawed misunderstanding of how individual...
Not only that, it just continues the hatred. It just passes it on. Because then now you're gonna have some white kid that is in a disadvantaged position, and then somebody's gonna tell them that they're privileged because they're white, and then they're just gonna resent everybody else that isn't white because they're the ones doing it to him. Exactly, and then the cycle continues.
Rights actually function. And so Elon Musk is absolutely in the right to call the South African government out on their shenanigans here. It is ethno-guilt, it is wokeness on steroids, it is 100% stupid. But sadder than that is again the reaction to it, which brings me to focus on the real main point of this video, which is just seeing how many trash libs are taking the side of the BEE policies really showcases and emphasizes a problem I've noticed for a long time.
It's pretty crazy because they're doing this in the name of like anti-racism, but they're actually the most racist people in the room, and it keeps happening. This is like not a unique thing. This is something that it's basically all over the place, where the people who are the most like virtue signaling about race, and they're the ones that are like, oh, we really care about racism, we're trying to solve racism, literally the most racist people.
Time, which is that the reasonable far left is dead. They don't exist anymore. And oh yes, they really did used to exist. Those of us,
and you'll have a gamer in a room with like 5 of his homies, 2 of them are black, and they're all saying the N-word. They're less racist than these people. It's absolute clown.
Us old enough to remember, which you honestly don't have to be that old, can remember that even as early as the late 1990s, a lot of people in the far left had a much more reasonable justification for their stances on economic inequality, which is that it was more about helping people who are down on their luck. I remember a long time ago, a lot more people on the far left were more likely to argue things like, well, many of the rich are simply lucky, rather than working hard. That we live in a society...
Yeah, Oracle Lord Casimir says the most racist friend group is always the most diverse. The funny thing is that there was like a meme, like, wait, when did I see that? Did I see that yesterday on stream? There was like the meme that had like there was the meme with a group of people, and it was like the gamers, and they had like the most diverse like group of friends, and they were all like just kind of talking shit about each other. And then you had the other one of saying like, wow, that's racist. We love diversity. And it was like all the same kind of person.
With lots of rules and lots of different things happening. And of course, we have a very large infrastructure that has been built over hundreds of years. And just about everybody who gets rich today depends at least somewhat on the ingenuity and the infrastructure created before they were born. It's just the reality of how human society works and how scientific advancement happens. And so that's a much better justification to look at things from the standpoint of economic inequality, because it actually has some truth to it.
I really think a lot of the modern racism stuff is all built around it's just what's the word? It's like social warfare. It's basically just like using other people's race to like buff yourself by like saying how much you care and how much you're such a good person. You just give yourself like all these nice guy buffs, but like you actually don't give a shit about any of it.
Times wealth is just luck. Now, of course, on average, if you look at people who are wealthy and people who are not wealthy, the wealthier do usually have higher intelligence. And
all you have to do to know that I'm right is what happened during the election. What happened when a bunch of Latinos voted for Trump? What happened? They instantly turned on them.
Better work ethic, and we're more likely to attend higher education, etc., etc. However, there are billions of us on this planet,
it's like
and
Clint
the reality is
Eastwood's character in Gran Torino, where every time he walks into a room casually throwing slurs and it's all to people he's
friends with, yeah.
Education, etc., etc. However, there are billions of us on this planet, and the reality is there are things that are outside of our control. We all roll the dice with every action that we take, and some of us statistically...
Wait, what? Rich people create scientific... Niles Naomi says rich people create scientific advancement. Capitalist dipshit. Sorry, is that something he said and I skipped over it?
Etc., etc. However, there are billions of us on this planet, and the reality is there are things that are outside of our control. We all roll the dice with every action that we take, and some of us statistically are going to consistently roll snake eyes.
Rich people create scientific advancement. I'm thinking about it. Give me a sec. Rich people create scientific advancement. I think that rich people will probably create a large amount of it. I don't know about all scientific advancement. Well, it depends. Like, what do you mean by scientific advancement? Like, really, like truly pioneer feels like biotech and like AI. In those cases, it would be true. For the most part, there might be like some dude in the basement doing it, but for the most part, a lot of it is probably fueled by rich people because they have the funds to do it. By having money, you have the means to actually like drive stuff forward. And that doesn't mean that everybody who is rich drives stuff forward. That's not true either. But you definitely have more of a means to drive progress forward if you have money. So I can kind of see what he's saying, but there's probably also cases of like a dude in his freaking basement with a freaking CRISPR kit that could do it too, right? Yeah.
And so you are...
I'm kind of neutral on that, I think.
Statistically going to have a very small number of people who are brilliant, hard workers, and yet end up with nothing every single time. And then there are very lazy, stupid people who are just kind of born into a wealthy family and inherit it all. And because of this, back in the day, lefties were a lot more likely to make arguments and justifications along the lines of, oh, well, we live in a society where some people are fortunate and some people are not. And so a moral and just society needs to have some form of charity and some form of respect for the poor. So there was this very big justification that being rich was more based on luck. And that's a justification that is, again, one that is grounded in some level of truth.
Yep.
Not all the time, but statistically it does happen. It is absolutely possible for a person to get screwed over as a result of things outside of their control. And those of us who support the free market, those of us with a libertarian-minded view of society, need to acknowledge that. It's one of the reasons why one of my older videos was about mutual aid societies. I do believe that in a free world, just about everybody should voluntarily associate themselves with an aid network of their choice. Charity towards the less fortunate is in fact a virtue that society needs to thrive. There is very good evidence that shows that that is a low time preference virtue. A culture where people don't care about the well-being of others in the society is a society that doesn't last. That's just kind of a reality. And plus,
Most
this
Renaissance
justification is
inventors
actually...
were broke, poor, and only surviving by their patrons keeping them around.
Thank you, Zol. Thank you so much for the bits. Yeah, there's that too. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's like I said, you need resources in order to drive progress, right? Whatever the source of those resources are. So I guess like on some level you could say that almost always, again, there are cases of people that just kind of do things in their own garage and they do drive progress. I mean, a lot of stuff was kind of like that. But in the end, you need resources to actually like bring that to market, right? So in the end, you kind of do need rich people. But they're not always the full thing. It's not always like solely the rich person. The truth is, guys, when it comes to like when it comes to like advancement, like scientific advancement, like technological advancement, it's a lot of people working on it. It's not just one person, right? It's not always a single person who does it. Like for instance, a lot of people get mad at Elon and they say like, oh, he didn't really do anything because he just like has the money and like he starts the business. But like that's also important. Like being able to like build up the team and like hire the right people, structure the company properly. And what's the word I'm looking for? Delegate tasks to the right people. Those are all still really important aspects of a business. So, yeah. It's a team effort. Yeah, exactly. So it's like you do need people with money in order to fund the logistics of like what you're going to do. But you also do need people that are creative, people that are smart, that can actually like do the actual work. Who's to dictate who's the right person? The person who fits the job or the one who's your friend? Well, sometimes it's both. That's a little complicated. So the thing is like when you hire, there's a little bit more nuance. Niles Naomi says, who's to dictate who's the right person? The person who fits the job or the person who's your friend? There's a lot more nuance to that. It's not that simple. So for instance, let's say that like there's a person, right? Let's say person A is like has a skill level of 10 and say person B has a skill level of 8. Okay, but then say person B, I know them, and I know I can trust them. Then that might make the 8 overcome the 10. Do you see what I'm saying? Having like a sense of trust and like, oh, I already know this person. I know how they're gonna perform. I don't have to guess. I know they're gonna do what I tell them to do, and they're gonna do it right. That can overcome like a higher skill level. Trust is part of the hiring factor. What Julio said. Exactly. 100%. Yes. You mean friends with no or little skills? Yeah. I mean, that's just their fault. I mean, that's just a bad pick. And you will reap the consequences of that, right? Yeah, you reap the consequences of it and shit fails. I've seen it happen all the time.
Compatible with libertarian
It's a waste of money.
Philosophy. There is absolutely no contradiction whatsoever between libertarian thinking and charity, and recognizing that some poor people are in fact just unlucky. But of course, the problem is, and the issue that this latest happening has once again revealed, is that kind of leftist thinking is very increasingly rare. They've dumped the less fortunate narrative in favor of the oppression narrative. So no longer do you really see much of the far left using an appeal to virtuous senses.
Dude, the funny shit is that like Sigma in the background right now like just matches the color palette. Like he like fits like so perfectly with like the right side of the picture. It's amazing.
of voluntary charity. Oh, no, no, no. Now it's all about this cringe, mandatory, state-enforced altruism. And the less fortunate / more fortunate argument just doesn't really do it for them. So instead, now the rich, rather than just some of them being lucky, the narrative now is that they are all beneficiaries of some corrupt white supremacist system, and that they have gained their riches through oppression and systemic discrimination of disadvantaged groups. Trademark. So now the narrative is, rather than the rich being lucky, they are now the villains. They're now the bad guys. Trademark. This resurrection of this belief that the economy is always a zero-sum game. The rich do not have more because they've generated more, but rather the rich have more through exploitation.
Another thing I do have to say, sorry, I just thought of this right now while I was thinking about it. To kind of further respond to you, Niles Nomi, if a person owns a private business and they want to hire a 2 over an 8 because it's their friend, they can just do that. I don't really see anything wrong with that. Do I think it's a smart decision? I don't think it's a smart decision. But I mean, like, it's their decision to make, right?
And stealing surplus labor value from the poor. And that's what people taking the side of the South African government in this particular context of Elon Musk really highlight.
You reap the benefits, you reap the punishment of, like, whatever decision you make.
It's just a sad and unfortunate reminder to us of the fact that the Marxists...
It might be a good decision. Like, if you see something in them, you see potential in that person. They're a hard worker. You see that they have the potential to grow to, like, a much stronger unit. You give them a chance, and they do. Happens all the time.
Takeover of all leftist thinking has effectively been completed, and so the reasonable left is dead. Long live
happening in the U.S. government,
and it's really kind of sad. I don't even know the of the fact that the Marxist takeover of all leftist thinking has effectively been completed, and so the reasonable left is
government's a little bit different because you kind of vote for those people, right? So it's a little bit different.
Is dead. Long live collectivist brain.
Are you talking about Elon? Are you talking about Elon being in the government? I guess I don't understand what your point is.
Kind of sad. I don't even remember the last time I saw someone who would consider themselves a far lefty using the luck.
Sorry, I'm not trying to like call you out and like be mean or anything like that. I really don't get it. Like I don't know what part specifically you're talking about because it's kind of a broad thing that you said, right?
For an appeal to voluntary charity. In fact, I distinctly recall exactly the opposite. Now you're more likely to see them just openly being socialist and actually getting upset when they see charity. So instead of viewing philanthropy as a good thing, they instead look at it as bad because it justifies the continuation of the capitalist exploitation system. And so true libertarian leftism is just not a thing anymore. And in place what we...
People like Kamala, the problem I have with Kamala is that the only reason Joe Biden literally said that he needed a black woman to be vice president. So, I mean, you know.
See as something that is just entirely statist. They now all want to lick the boot of a government that views any and all success as the result of some kind of oppression. And under this mindset, anybody who's rich hasn't actually done anything right. They haven't actually produced anything, but rather instead they're just the beneficiary of privilege and colonialism and whatnot. And so any and all sense of virtue in the ideology has now been replaced with victimhood. You'll no longer see things like you should give to your less fortunate brother because we've all had our downtimes in life. Now instead it's just an authoritarian justification that the rich have collectively done something evil to the poor, and that's why they're rich. The fact that this new justification, the collectivist brain rot justification, isn't true doesn't really seem to matter to them. It obviously doesn't hold up to any basic scrutiny. I mean, I've already pointed out many times in both the equity fallacy and the equality fallacy. The oppression narrative is objectively...
Well, I want to watch that one, the equity fallacy. I want to watch that one.
False. But things like this, where them calling Elon Musk a liar when he's very much telling the truth, I think that really sadly shows that they don't really care about the truth anymore. Which I guess there's kind of a silver lining in that. Because this case of Elon...
Either that or they're just too dumb. That's also a possibility.
Musk Derangement Syndrome has shown that a lot of them are now just openly admitting and telling us that they have completely lost connection with reason. So we can at least just kind of know that we have, in fact, reached the point where the best thing we can do is just make sure none of these cycles...
Wait, you can play as Alia in this game? I need this game.
was ever gain power. We can look at the South African government's absolutely insane pants-on-head ethno-guilt policies and know for a fact that, yep, the lefties sadly really do want to do the same thing in Western countries. They want those policies in America, they want those policies in various European countries, they want these big government solutions everywhere. The establishment in the government is corrupt, and the solution is more establishment and more government. And collective guilt has caused problems in the past, and the solution is to do more collective guilt today. Yep, that'll totally fix everything. And the saddest thing of all, or the funniest, depending on which way you look at it, is just the fact that this just isn't really that surprising. I mean, really, does seeing socialists and partisan hacks simping for the South African government's ethno-guilt policies really a shocker to anybody at this point? Because looking at a lot of the rhetoric from journalists and various decadent elites in the last few decades, it's really what we just expect at this point. For instance, there's the saying amongst the Moldbugians that Cthulhu may swim slowly, but he only swims left. And I think that's actually just an oversimplification of a much more broader concept. I think it's more like Cthulhu, or chaos, just kind of swims in the direction of a society or ideology's logical conclusion. And so if there's some kind of flaw in the way society thinks, or a flaw in the ideology that the society is following, then as time goes on, that flaw becomes harder and harder to ignore. People start drawing attention to the flaw, because the flaw never really goes away, because the society doesn't actually have a way of dealing with the flaw. And so in order to fix it without admitting that their ideology is wrong, or without admitting that something in society is wrong, or without admitting that something in their core philosophy is wrong, people are forced to resort to crazier and crazier acts and more ridiculous mental gymnastics in order to justify their belief without actually acknowledging that the flaw is their fault. And that's what we're really seeing here. I think the moment that the radical left shifted to the point where the vast majority of them now accept the oppression narrative that inequalities are generally caused by an oppressor-victim dichotomy, it was just kind of inevitable. Because the more reasonable justification that we used to see in genuine libertarian leftist thinking, the justification that you should care for your brethren because sometimes he's just down on his luck, that sometimes rich and poor is just a matter of luck, or to just put it really simply, life isn't fair, that narrative just doesn't have the same strong spike to it, even though it has more truth to it. I think they
life isn't fair. That's true.
Kind of dropped that narrative because it doesn't let them justify using the state to do it. So while the oppression narrative may not be true, it does justify an authoritarian power grab if you pretend that it is true. And this allows them to compartmentalize away the fact that they've really just unfortunately become useful idiots for the establishment that they claim to be fighting against. Which of course is completely insane, and so being disingenuous and being openly dishonest is really the only game left. Nobody wants to just outright admit that they no longer believe in any principles and they're just flapping words out of their mouths in order to justify gaining power. So instead we see this open deception. For instance, going back to that IOL article, it makes no attempt whatsoever to hide the fact that it's lying from anybody who's actually informed on this specific event. For instance, it reads, in a recent post, Musk claimed that his satellite internet constellation, Starlink, is not allowed in South Africa because he is not black. Tesla owner was responding to another misinformation claim that there are 140 race-based laws in the country which are all anti-white. In actuality, Musk's Starlink plans to expand into South Africa have been halted as the business withdrew from regulatory hearings held by the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. Which, of course, when you know that the regulations and questions are about BEE's policy of requiring a certain percentage of ethnic representation in the ownership, when you know that those regulations that Starlink has a problem with are regulations that specifically target Elon Musk because he is white, you just immediately know that this journalist is lying. It's not even really a half-truth spin job here, it's just an outright blatant falsification. And in some ways that's kind of funny, but in the same ways it's also kind of sad. It's sad that we have reached this point in society where everyone's just kind of playing the Game of Thrones. We've reached this kind of post-truth point in society where people are just saying whatever they think they need to say in order to justify whatever they think they need to justify in order for them to quote-unquote win. And this really emphasizes the need for those of us who care about freedom still to put a more greater focus on delegitimizing the psychopaths. Because one white pill is that the average person doesn't actually like this crap. Even here where I live around...
It's the reason why Trump became president.
On the Portland, Oregon area, when you explain equity crap to your average, normal person, they generally reject the oppression narrative. Most people find this to be absurd and weird because it is. The problem is people don't realize just how many people in elite positions and in journalist positions are using this kind of reasoning to lie to them. They don't realize just how much of what we see in establishment media is just deranged authoritarian propaganda. The normies are just still, unfortunately, completely unaware of just how much of what they see is fake. And I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of general conservatives are okay with Hoppian libertarians like myself, but dislike general libertarians who reject Hop. There are some deep cultural issues behind all of these problems.
I actually don't know about the Hoppian thing, Hoppian libertarian. He has a video on there. I probably should watch it because I don't know what that is. I'm gonna be real.
That really do need to be addressed. I've seen a few libertarians out there occasionally getting upset at people like me for calling out anti-white racism. And the thing is, you have to realize that this is the manner by which the authoritarian leftists are currently drawing their justifications for more power from. They are using ethno-guilt to justify Marxism. And I think any political strategy for libertarians going forward that refuses to acknowledge that fact is equivalent to just sticking your head in the sand. Sorry if that sounds a bit harsh, but that's just how it is. I think a lot of centrist liberals...
Hop is anarcho-capitalism plus social conservatives? That sounds pretty nice.
Can still be reasoned with here,
I should
especially
go
the
watch
ones
it,
that
the
reject
video on
the
it.
equity fallacy. But for the ones that do accept the equity fallacy, unfortunately, I don't think libertarians can really reason.
My main problem with libertarianism is it doesn't take into account human nature. I don't think it takes into account human nature enough. Yeah.
With
my
the far
problem with
lefties anymore, at the very least on this specific topic. We are, in fact, very much long past that point. And so what we should really be doing instead is focusing on showing the general public that this is the crap that
Actually, I think that's like a major problem, just like in general, is that a lot of people don't take into account human nature.
awaits them if they keep giving in to the left.
It's just why we can't have nice things for the most part.
Normies need to understand that if they look at South Africa and they don't like what they're seeing, then they need to stop voting for any whack job who promises equity, because we are well past the point where it's always a grift.
If someone says if someone says equity, it's like I already wouldn't vote for them basically.
Anyways, that is all. Thanks for watching.
If they're promoting equity, because equity is inherently stupid.
Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. And if you like my content, you can support me on Ko-Fi, subscribe,
The idea that things should be equal regardless of that the outcome should always be equal is just really stupid.
or by buying some merch, or by becoming a member of the channel. And again, there is some...
I'm trying to how do I explain what I mean by that? Like, if a person does nothing, decides to do nothing, they should not have an equal outcome to a person that is working hard. That's it, simply. Basically.
some new merch on the merch store.
What's important is the opportunity. Is that the opportunity is equal by law. No, sorry, the opportunity according to the law, not all opportunity, right? Opportunity according to the law, I think, is the important part.
Related merch, since again this is an Elon Musk related video. And I'm going to be doing another video relatively soon, as in probably this month, focused on debunking a lot of the misinformation surrounding Doge, or the Department of Government Efficiency, because a lot of the way that journos have been covering Doge is just as high on the gaslighting scale as what I've just covered in this video. But for now, that is all.
Have you seen the picture of the guy standing on the boxes? That proves that equity is correct. Wait, what? Standing on boxes, equity correct picture. Is it the thing with everybody having like a box, enough boxes that makes them able to see over the wall, where the legs get chopped off? There's like so many of these actually. Anyway, you know what? I'm gonna watch the
Till next time.
I'm gonna watch the video about like his brand of libertarianism, because I'm really curious about it. Anyways, I'll link you guys the video. I like Mentis's videos a lot.